up, everybody? Appreciate you joining in again. My name is Ricky Rains. I'm the host of the Bo Body Show. I thought it was just appropriate, before we got into this really quiet period of the offseason. We've gone through the offseason program. We've gone through minicamp. We've seen the rookie minicamp. We've seen OTAs. We've had a lot of fun with some of the stories of those things. So I thought it would be a good idea to come in and, before we get into the quiet part, kind of do a recap on where we stand with the Carolina Panthers. We've got the stadium renovations in play. We've got a holiday coming up this weekend that's important to celebrate for the Carolina Panthers, and the fact that we are, in fact, the father to the Los Angeles Chargers and the Arizona Cardinals. I'll dig into that a little bit more. I just, I try to get a dig in wherever I can because everyone likes to get their digs in on the Carolina Panthers. So I try to even the score a little bit. But to help me do it tonight, I've got a friend of mine that I respect very much and that I have also been really bad about getting an episode recorded with him and actually putting it out for other people to see and not just me, myself, watching it. So I'm very excited about the fact that I was able to make this happen tonight. Let's go ahead and welcome the guest to the stage, Mr. JJ Hardy. You might know him as Panthers Culture on Twitter. JJ, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
Hey, look, you said it earlier, right? I can't complain.
Yeah, I can't complain. I won't complain. Nobody would care anyway. Nobody
would care, man. Like, it would just be kind of that hamster wheel thing, right? We'd just be talking to ourselves and trying to make ourselves feel better.
That's right.
So look, man, let's jump straight into this thing, right? I think that the first thing that I think about when I think about the Carolina Panthers and recent happenings, today, Yahoo Sports writer Nate Tice put out a really fair, really contextualized piece about Bryce Young and about his rookie season and kind of where he can envision him improving, where he has obvious physical struggles. And I think that it was a eye-opening piece for a lot of Carolina Panthers fans, even Bryce Young supporters, detractors. Look, they're gonna say what they say regardless, right? There's really no talking some of them off the ledge. But I think that it was a fair starting point for a conversation. You and I kind of talked about it briefly today in an exchange, discussing Bryce and the big comp that he had in there, right, was to Alex Smith as a comp for his trajectory and kind of his play style. I want to get your just initial thoughts of that article before we go on to anything else.
Well, first of all, I appreciate, Nate for writing that article, for taking the time. You could tell he did some deep diving. I was tracking some tweets, some video clips that he was tweeting out throughout the week. So I felt like that was leading up to something, related.
He's a smart guy, isn't he?
Yeah. He definitely, led us there. And today was the day where he revealed, what he found. So, just speaking about the article specifically, when I read it, I like the way that he kind of put all the stuff that we knew and what everybody kind of agreed upon up front. Hey, look, bad situation, the coaching situation, the schematics, the offensive line, just put all that stuff out there so he could, basically tell the Bryce fans and the Carolina Panthers fans, hey, look, I get it, right? I get it. Everybody saw that. I acknowledge that. That's problematic for everyone. But once he kind of got through that, that's when he kind of focused just on who Bryce Young is.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he did it because, one of the things that's become really, really stressful for me as a fanalist, however you want to put that, fan analyst, over the last few years, I've always tried to be fair, to quarterbacks. I never subscribed to the idea that quarterbacks had to be like these dominant dudes, made in the mold of Cam Newton, or even Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, the new studs, that are leading the way in the NFL. Like, I didn't subscribe to the idea that your quarterback had to be that type of guy in order for you to win a Super Bowl. However, it is apparent, that having that type of dude leading your team is very beneficial. And oftentimes, those guys are the guys at the end during the postseason. And but when you look at what Nate wrote about Bryce in terms of some of his physical limitations, and it wasn't even focused on necessarily his height, but some of the things that his height, I think, leads to in terms of his tendencies, the drifting and, which opens up himself to sacks, which kind of has a negative impact on how the offensive line can be viewed at times, even beyond, some of their, weaknesses that they already have. It's like, you're making an already bad offensive line worse sometimes by doing what you do. And then by drifting, you put yourself at a disadvantage because you don't have a big arm, to make some of the throws from the depth that you have to make them from because you're drifting, so far back. Mm-hmm. And all of these things were showing up every week almost. We had a few good games, but like almost every week, these things reared their head. And when fans, try to identify those things that, we may not have it exactly right, because a lot of us, now I know I'm not an expert on being able to break down, what a quarterback should look like, especially in full speed and real time, under duress, like how their feet should look, how they should square up, where their arm angle, should be. Like, I don't know that, but I'm watching football and I've watched a lot of football in my lifetime. And I looked at Bryce a lot of times and said, ooh, like this just doesn't look good. Yeah. And it doesn't look good even when the environment is good, all the time. And so, you come to the timeline in real time during the game or sometimes after the game throughout the weekend, you try to talk about what you saw, but there's so many Bryce stands in the fan base to where like anytime you want to talk objectively about Bryce and offer some critique, then you get met with, oh, you hate Bryce Young, you just want to CJ Stroud, you just a hater, stay on that side when he gets good and this and that. And I'm like, nah, man, that's not who I am. Like I supported Teddy. I tried to support Sam, even though Sam was probably about like my all-time least favorite quarterback. I tried my best to get behind all the quarterbacks who played, Kyle Allen, PJ Walker.
I mean, once they put on the processed blue, the black, and the silver, it's all the same, right? Like that's your quarterback, man.
That's all I got. Like I don't want to go into Sundays and expect our quarterback to stink it up and for me to suffer through 3 hours, and because I love watching football. I love watching my team play. I hate watching really bad football though. Man, it's the worst thing in the world. Like my attitude is so bad here on Sundays. Like around the dinner table after I watch bad football, it's like everybody hates me.
And it's like Sunday dinner, man. Like you're sitting down for a family dinner, you're about to start the work week, and you're just pissed off because of what just happened on the field. Yeah,
I'm pissed. And then when I see and oftentimes for us in our house, so we watch the games, for the 1 o'clock slate. Mm-hmm. After our game ends, and over the last 5 seasons, like it typically ends bad. Then you go to cooking and and then it's time to eat, but you're eating and you watching like the second slate and it's like a really good game on and really good teams playing.
It's like watching a whole different football league, man.
Yeah. And it's like, so anyway, if I go down that thing. Bryce, is a guy that he's so likable. Mm-hmm. I think, the things that they loved about him, I think he has those qualities. I mean, and I've never tried to take away from, the intangible things that he offers, like the intelligence, I even think the quick processing. I think he is that guy that they interviewed, that they heard speak, when they went to visit him in Tuscaloosa, and everybody who's ever been around him, he was so poised, always said the right things. Obviously he had a stellar college career. I thought he was the best college quarterback, for very much of the 2 seasons I saw him play at Alabama. And so, and I've tweeted about that. Always been a fan of his. However, I have a scouting show, that I do with my good friend Vincent Richardson, Scouting the Culture. And, last year's season of Scouting the Culture was like our biggest season because it was the first year where we was able to talk about the quarterback position, knowing that we were going to pick one and knowing that we were going to pick one at number 1. So we really did a deep dive into who the top QB prospects were, their strengths and weaknesses. And so a lot of the things that showed up during the season about Bryce were things that Vincent and I discussed in detail on the quarterback episode of Scout and the Culture. So I wasn't shocked to see some of the struggles. But I'm a fan. And I think as a fan, we just want to believe that, okay, we've been waiting, for us, it was about, I guess, 3 seasons for us to draft a guy. And I think this is where everything got crossed at between, what the fans wanted and what ownership, the Carolina Panthers, wanted. Fans wanted a quarterback football messiah. We wanted somebody to come in and be, the successor to Cam Newton, come in and just, as the first overall pick, like Cam, when he hit the scene, he started his first 2 games with 400 passing yards, rookie records, that's what we know the number 1 overall quarterback to do in Carolina, because that's what we saw the last time we had that pick.
Well, and to be fair too, the communication, right? The messaging, the phrasing from our own organization alluded to the fact that we should expect that season, right? Like they literally set it up and said, "Hey, we're going to drop a quarterback in situation." It's just it was a really unfair circumstance to drop anybody in. First of all, like had it been Bryce, had it been CJ, had it been AR, no matter who you dropped in, I think that they were fighting an uphill battle, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that that's a really important part to emphasize, because all of that messaging kind of fed into the fan base. And there's a lot of people like I did the same thing, right? I scouted the quarterbacks, and I want to get your opinion on this, because you made an interesting point that I want to hear, is that you saw a lot of the things that when you and Vincent were doing your scouting program and you were going over the quarterbacks and you were doing your draft profiles, a lot of the things that you saw in Bryce in the season, you saw in college. So it wasn't a shock to you to see some of the struggles from him.
No.
But here's one point that I have been curious about personally, right? And this is just when I see major analysts, when I see fans, when I see a lot of people, and they're discussing Bryce Young. I've never romanticized Bryce Young's arm strength, right? Like that's never been his thing that you write home about. That has never been his calling card. And if you thought that it was, you probably watched a different film than everybody else did. Like that just wasn't even his thing in Alabama, right? I do think that it was completely adequate. And so where I have this little bit of a gripe with certain aspects of the conversation surrounding Bryce is I'm confused on how some people had this, he's a consensus number 1 or even a consensus top 10 pick. Let's say you don't think he's number 1, right? There's a lot of people that fairly had CJ Stroud evaluated and graded above Bryce Young. And I wouldn't argue that, man. Like you can go back and look to see when I went through the process. I tossed and turned, man. Like I really did. It was neck and neck for me between those two. I love the physical aspects of what Anthony Richardson brought to the game of football. There were a lot of question marks about his ability to put it all together for me personally. So I wasn't as interested at putting him as my number 1 quarterback, because he just didn't grade out that way for me. There were a lot of things that I think you had to project with him. I think that if all situations were equal and talent was around and it was a competent build of a roster, I thought that Bryce Young and CJ Stroud could have comparable success early on. I didn't necessarily think that it would ever be the success level that CJ Stroud found in his first year with Houston. That's also a dynamic that I think has played a huge part in the evaluation of Bryce, right? Yeah. Like CJ Stroud came out, dude, and he was a world beater as a rookie on a Texans team that had not been prolific, had not been dynamic. And they made upgrades, but they did a lot of things with the same personnel outside of their coaching staff and their scheme, right? That's a huge part. But with Bryce, I see so many people saying that he's got this weak arm and that he can't make the throws. I don't necessarily see that, JJ. And like, I'm just being honest. Like when I do my evaluation on him, and this is just going back to his college time, right? And even flashes in the NFL, he struggles absolutely on drive throws. A lot of times what I see with that is that it is footwork and base related and being in rhythm and all of those, the lower half mechanics and his arm and his release and his timing, all of those things working in unison seem to play against him. He
Yes.
doesn't have the elite arm strength to compensate for being off kilter with his mechanics. But
Right.
when he can have everything tied together, I don't see this wet noodle arm. Like I see a guy that can make throws, but it has to be a much cleaner and more concise throwing motion. Is that fair? Because I see so many people saying that he's got a weak arm.
No, I mean it's totally fair because, like you know, one of my biggest concerns about him was arm strength. You know, so I tried to go back and find as many, highlights, cut ups and film, or people who have done film review of his throws, right? You know, and he has all the arm strength or power, to throw a deep ball. You know, for example, I think I went back and I looked, and I think his deepest throw that I've seen in college was around like 60 yards, right? And that's about on par with the average, NFL arm.
And you're not throwing 60 yards majority of the game,
No, but he can, when we call up a deep shot, he can definitely throw the ball deep. I think what you said is the key, though, with Bryce, and I think Nate, Tice, he brought it up in his article today.
Right.
When Bryce has everything all together, his feet are right. He can really, step into the throw and rip it. He can, turn his shoulder. He can, use his core, to really get around on the throw. I think, he throws with zip. He throws with, decent velocity. But, one of his fundamental flaws has been that he likes to drift a lot. So if Bryce is moving backwards or not moving into his throw, then he doesn't have like one of these crazy Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes baseball arms, Kyler Murray that can just throw the ball falling back, 40 yards down the field or throw it on the rope, 20 yards down the field while he's drifting away or falling back. And that's the thing that is frustrating, right? Because it's like, what I mentioned a little while ago, while I'm having that, that 6 o'clock dinner on Sunday, and I'm watching Kansas City play, or I'm watching, the Chargers play, watching these elite guys play, they're making those throws pretty routinely now, right? And so when you go and draft a guy number 1 overall, then you have anticipation that he's going to be in the same league of arm talent as the top guys in the league.
That's fair.
And the only guy that is in that elite category who has like similar arm strength, but I think is still slightly better, is Joe Burrow, right? Who got drafted first overall, who's widely considered, to be, top 2, top 3, top 4 in the league.
He's in that small group of a conversation about the elite players at the position.
Yeah, but without having like the crazy arm.
Because honestly, man, his arm strength, his arm talent is relatively comparable to a guy like Bryce Young, despite the fact that he's 4 or 5 inches taller. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think the thing that gives him an advantage, like early over Bryce Young, was that I think fundamentally he was just a lot more together. Like he saw it quicker. He had, better guys on the outside who can go get it,
absolutely
with more confidence. And so he trusted his guys. He got it out of his hands quicker. And I think it's one of those things when you have a certain skill set and you're just really confident in that, you just rely on what your strengths are, right? Kind of like Tom Brady, not to compare any of those guys to Tom, but Tom, didn't have any kind of special trait, improvisation. So he had to stay within himself, make the throw. I think Joe can do some improv stuff, but like typically he likes to stay in the pocket, deliver. He move around in the pocket, very smartly. Bryce didn't have that ability last year, partly because of the interior O-line was trash and the left tackle was trash. But then when he did, because all of those bad things happened to him so early with lack of protection and stuff, those bad tendencies, showed up routinely, and he began to kind of just do things that led to, I won't say it didn't always end up in bad results, but inconsistent results. And so I think that's what Nate really highlighted, in his article, was that, hey, look, he said a few times that, he had less than ideal arm strength or whatever he used. I'm like you. I don't think that the arm strength is bad. I think it's probably like league average arm strength.
Yeah.
I just don't think he has enough arm strength to not have everything together, like with his lower half, and and so
It's exactly what you were saying about not being able to be off structure, right? And on these weird angles and on his back foot drifting away, he has to generate whip, right? He has to use his core. Now, where Bryce does have a advantage, and I won't say an advantage from like a physical arm strength capacity, but an advantage is the arm elasticity, right? You talk a lot about like his delivery and his releases. That was a really hot topic about why he had favorable comps to even a guy like an Aaron Rodgers throwing style. I don't think that I ever saw anyone say he had Aaron Rodgers throwing velocity and power, right? That was never anything anyone said. Aaron Rodgers is one of the premier arm talents we've ever seen play the game, right? Period. Absolutely incredible, man. He's got all of his hijinks that, look, me and you could spend 3 hours if we want to dig into why Aaron Rodgers isn't my kind of person. But from a quarterback standpoint, that dude is undeniably one of the greatest talents we've ever watched play.
He's the best quarterback I've ever watched. And I mean, that's a different topic. But
I agree with you though, man. Like from a raw talent and just like his ability to play that position and knowing timing, working everything out the way that position has to be able to click on all cylinders to find elite levels of success. Aaron Rodgers has it. The arm elasticity though is why there were these like baby Mahomes, baby Aaron Rodgers type of similarities, is because he can, man. Like he finds these really bizarre angles and release points to get his throws off. But a lot of times it is with a square base or with him climbing up into the pocket. So he's driving off of his feet as opposed to floating backwards. We know he plays toesy, and a lot of the toesy play is because he's 5'10". Look, dude, he's not going to grow 4 inches. You know what I mean? Like the dude is 5'10". That is what it is. I think that and you made a great point earlier, man, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot today. Number one picks don't always come in the same exact mold, or franchise quarterbacks. Number one picks, dude, we could get even more into that and say maybe Bryce Young isn't your prototypical guy that you should have taken with the number one pick based off of his physical talents. I don't have any problem with somebody saying that. And I'm a huge Bryce Young supporter and believer, but I 100% understand why somebody would say that he's not who you should take at number one overall, right? That there are other guys that have the tools that you can mold and build something better with, especially if your team is not built for plug and play.
Yeah.
But where I think that Bryce Young is getting a little bit of an undervalued situation, I don't think that he's the docile little fella that we saw last year. I just don't believe that, man. I didn't see that at Alabama watching him play. I saw more juice to him. I don't know how much the shoulder injury that he sustained in his final year at Alabama, I don't know how much that played into him not throwing at the combine and stuff like that. If that was more of a self-preservation to not go up against everybody else. I don't believe that either, though. Bryce Young seems like a very competitive guy. That's his nature.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe he was still kind of getting over that and maybe having a off season, maybe doing a little bit more strength and conditioning, because he does look like he's bulked up a tiny bit. Not so much that it's an impediment. You don't want a guy who's a brick house necessarily. You want that elasticity. You don't want to get rid of that movement for him. And he has a smaller frame, dude. You can't pack on too much. It's going to change that. Yeah. But I do wonder, man, if we see adjustments made with his footwork and the emphasis on his base, the timing, I think that Canales is stressing, man, that 2.7 seconds, and that just being like the barometer. I don't want people to run with that, though, and think that every single throw needs to get off in 2.7 seconds or else it's a failure. That's not what he means. You know what I'm saying? Like he has...
That's the average clock. He just wants him to have a clock in his head.
Correct. And he has other concepts. He's already said we have concepts that are going to be 3.5, almost 4 seconds. Those are different concepts, and they have to marry in to our core concepts of 2.7. Right? Yeah. Like this is where we want you to progress through that first read to the second read. You have to be able to get the ball out in that manner of time. Yeah. I think that's great for Bryce. I also think that it's very reliant, and this will kind of segue into what we go into next. It's also very reliant on the protection and on his playmakers, because I think what I saw a lot of last season was Bryce couldn't really throw when he should have been able to throw. Now, that can be because his receivers weren't at their marks when you would want them to be in that amount of time.
Yeah.
You could even say they were a little bit slow. Even our best receiver wasn't exactly a road runner, right? Like,
yes.
I didn't hear a whole lot of beep beep while he was going, right? Like, that wasn't his calling card either. But what they did is they bring in a guy like Deontay Johnson, who is a separator and a quick guy that can get open on his own. He can create separation without the scheme creating it for him.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if you need a scheme to create separation, it's going to be longer than 3 seconds because it's a conceptual generation of separation, right? It is not a natural ability to win on a release right off the line. That's how you win in quick pass game. Then you add a Xavier Legette, who I think is going to be an absolute weapon in a dynamic of folds, man. I don't know exactly how they use him. I would anticipate a relatively similar usage of DK Metcalf his rookie year with Canales, where you see a high percentage of vertical planes, right? And then you're going to manufacture some touches for him. But for the most part, man, I mean, he's the guy that everyone wanted Jonathan Mingo to be when it comes to like physical, big size, speed. Not that they're the same player, but the profile, I think, is something that works out. Right. What are your thoughts? And this is how we'll segue into this. What are your thoughts right now on the playmakers around Bryce? Have the Panthers done enough that we can give a fair evaluation on this quarterback this year?
Absolutely. I mean, well, let me back that up. I say absolutely for me. But I don't think that's fair to say, because when you look at other teams and other young quarterbacks, they may have better talent with them. Not necessarily, talking about, his peers, or his direct peer with CJ Stroud. They're always going to be linked together.
Always.
But because now his situation looks totally sick, with adding stuff on
it's crazy.
Nico and Tank Dell. But last year, I would say that it's compatible to what CJ had last year, right? With Nico Collins and Tank Dell, because Tank Dell was a rookie. Nico was somebody who had physical traits but had never put it together, in previous schemes and with other quarterbacks. This year we have, I think, a very legitimate separator, route runner, top tier route runner in Deontay Johnson. And I don't think people realize how good he's going to be for Bryce. All things, considered that they stay healthy. I think Deontay is like that guy. And I'm not putting him in like some elite wide receiver category.
Sure.
But I just think certain dudes are tailor fit for certain quarterbacks. And I think Bryce, coming off of last year where his receivers struggled to get open, I don't think he really trusted his receivers would be open. And so he didn't look that way, because he's an anticipatory thrower, right? So, but if you can't anticipate that your guy's going to be open at the spot where you want to throw it to, then you're not going to let it go.
You're taking away his superpower, right?
Yeah,
like that's literally his thing.
Yeah, but with these reps he's getting with Deontay now, Deontay is proven that he's going to separate basically from any one-on-one type coverage. Right. When they see one-on-one and they see single coverage on Deontay, I think they're going at that, right?
Yep.
And that's, and you've heard Canales.
That's why they talk about him, right? Being the X.
They talk about him being that guy. And so I think, just talking about his skill players, I think he was as good as we were going to get this offseason. So that's why I say absolutely, because
and we got him for peanuts.
Yeah,
right?
But we made a play for him, right? We traded for him. Yep. We ensured that we got our guy. We didn't wait for free agency.
That's right.
We went and saw the guy that we wanted, who might have been in a bad situation with this team, but we knew he had talent. Knew he could be had.
He was producing with Kenny Pickett, man. Like, look, if we're even the biggest Bryce detractors, you can't really look at me straight in the face and say that Bryce Young is worse off than Kenny Pickett.
He's better than Pickett.
Right.
I had Pickett as my fifth quarterback in his class. But
that was nice of you, by the way.
I know. Right? But no, he's better than Kenny Pickett. And I think for both him and Bryce, I think they both, hopefully with Dave Canales, they get a better play caller, play designer for both of them, right? And I think the way that this offense is going to run is that you're going to have to eventually roll coverage that way because that's who they're going to attack you with is Deontay. And when you have to start rolling coverage his way, then Xavier Legette, hopefully Mingo, TMJ, Thielen, somebody else is eating, or Jatavian Sanders maybe, is eating because of what you have to do to stop Deontay and that connection that Bryce and Deontay has. So I think that's my number one guy in terms of who we added was Deontay Johnson. Obviously, as you mentioned, Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, big, fast, strong. I think, we had a Spaces some months ago where we were talking about who would be the X type, and a lot of people on your space, they were, throwing out different names at that time, because it was pre-draft. And I kept coming back to Xavier Legette, thinking he was the most comparable to Metcalf, to DK Metcalf. And what people got to realize about this, and I mentioned this that night, I mentioned it whenever anybody else asked about it, coaches are who they are, right? Yeah. They do what has worked for them in the past. Like, they don't try to recreate, their scheme, their prototypes, for what works in their scheme. They try to find that guy wherever they go to do the thing that worked for them and got them up the ladder to where they are. So Dave Canales has now become the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. So he's going to go back and look at all the things they did in his time in Seattle and the year in Tampa and see who can I get to play the role that I had the most success with in my scheme. Right. So Deontay is one guy, and I don't know who he comps him to. I would say maybe Doug Baldwin in Seattle, maybe Chris Godwin down in Tampa. But I think that he is that route running specialist type guy that he's had before. I think Xavier Legette is going to be that Metcalf type guy. And so I'm excited for Xavier Legette. As a fan and having seen so much football, I don't put a lot of dependency on wide receivers who are rookies because it just takes so long for them to really figure it out. You might have a Garrett Wilson type, breakout, rookie season type dude, Tank Dell, like every once in a while, a wide receiver comes in and just tears it up. But I typically,
it's also the situation that they're in, though, right?
If they come in with a good quarterback, then they can just hit the ground running. But we don't know what our situation is going to be on offense, and what's the emphasis going to be, what's the identity going to be. So I don't want to just put Xavier Legette down as like a first year 1,000-yard offensive rookie of the year type dude, but I think he has all the tools, and so I think his tools are good for Bryce. I think paired with Deontay Johnson, I think they're different enough to where there can be very how do you say it? I don't want to say it's not compatible, but I guess they're compatible, right? Their strengths and their weaknesses, and things that I think they can really
complementary.
Complementary. That's the word. They're complementary, and so I look at those two as complementary. I look at the running back situation. Now, I don't love our running back situation. I like Chuba. I like Chuba coming out. And then I think I became like sour on Chuba a little bit because he had the hands issues and it was frustrating.
Pass protection, he had a lot of issues.
And we needed him to play so much because CMC wasn't healthy for much of the time. And
Chuba was dealing with injuries of his own too that no one knew the extent of that.
Yeah, and I kind of hated watching him sometimes because although he hit the hole, I like decisive runners like him because he does hit the hole vertically. He gets north and south, but sometimes when he got to the second level, I always felt like Chuba always left too much meat on the bone. He definitely left yards on the field. Like he couldn't shake a safety. He couldn't shake a linebacker, in the second level that, that other more talented running backs shook, and so I everybody's hype about Chuba. I just don't know if he's like that lead guy. And so if he's not the lead guy, then will it be Will it be Miles Sanders? Like, will he be a guy that can come in and be special and can hit a home run for you? We don't know that. So I hate that we don't have like one running back that can like hit a home run, that can like go 80. You know what I'm saying?
Are you hesitant to put that on Jonathan Brooks because of the ACL injury?
Yeah, I mean, and I love the pick. I love everything that I heard about Jonathan Sanders. Jonathan Brooks.
Jonathan Brooks. Yeah. No, you're good. Jatavian Sanders and Jonathan Brooks, both Texas fellas.
They Texas guys.
That's right.
And I did a podcast. It hasn't been released yet. With a young lady out of Austin, and and she's right there. At UT, and she was so high on them dudes, like she knows them, and she said Brooks is the guy,
stud.
Right?
He's a stud.
So he's a stud. And she was like, but when he gets right. Right. So because I don't know when he's going to get right, I don't know how much we're going to be able to lean on him being that guy. But I think when he gets right, and if he returns to form, because it's still a ACL injury, like they do heal faster and better than they did before. But I still want to see him look right again. And
that's fair.
Yeah, but if he is who he has been, and who they project him to be, then I think that takes the entire skill group like to another level, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it makes everybody look back at this draft and say it maybe goes from like a C, C minus C to like a B plus. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just in his, in what he can do. Because I think the next guy, JT Sanders. Yeah. I think he's going to be a dude. Like, he won't be like a two-way type guy that can run, block, and maul and catch and all that stuff that you get out of George Kittle or somebody like that. But I look at him like he can be like a Laporta, right? Can be a route runner, can get open, can be somebody that's really QB friendly for Bryce, and I think he can have an impact very early if they can trust him to get on the field. But again, he's a rookie. Right. So, he has Trimble ahead of him. He has Ian Thomas, who is doing this whole offseason trick again and making people believe he's a guy, but he has guys in front of him that can run block. And I think that's what they offer, right? They got the versatility of being able to feel for rundowns. And JT, he's not known to be that guy. Even the young lady from Austin, she was saying that, but I think his hands are, hands down better than those two guys. I think he has a natural feel for the game that's better than those guys. I won't put him on a level of a Kelsey or somebody like that, but I think he's somebody who truly understands where he needs to be for a quarterback. And I don't know that we've had that since Greg Olsen.
No. So, and what's interesting that you bring up about that too, though, is that Tommy Tremble and Chuba, we're talking about both of them recently. They were both mentioned by Dave Canales in pressers recently as standout at training camp or at minicamp, and he says it's about their effort too, which I can understand that though, because these are guys that have been here for the past couple regimes and not getting coached up by players coaches and not getting directives and not getting like detailed directives on what they want them to be doing. One of my main takeaways, man, I don't know if you've watched the first episode of The Blueprint, but one of my main takeaways of watching that was the expert level of communication that this coaching staff has, not just amongst each other, because like Dave Canales has made it very clear, he is very comfortable delegating, right? Like he trusts in his staff very, very much. And he is comfortable delegating that and being the big picture and focusing on the offense. He almost seems like he doesn't even want to take part in messing with Evero. He's like, look, dude, you are elite at what you do. You are on the fast track to being a head coach. Don't let me by any means come in here and muddy up your situation. Like, you're great. He wants to go in there and learn. He wants to learn from Ev about that side of the ball. But as far as like his focus, it seems to be very much on the offensive side. One interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, man, because you were talking and I started thinking about this. You talked about the coach not wanting to necessarily deviate from what he has had success in, right? And that's why you take the Xavier Legette and you can kind of make that easy transition into the DK Metcalf, Mike Evans type of profile, not necessarily the same player, man. And we don't want to insinuate that that's what we're saying, but it is absolutely that profile of what they could find success with. You were trying to figure out a comp for Deontay Johnson. I think that what Canales has said came into fruition a little bit with Deontay Johnson. Him saying he went back and watched what Bryce does well, right? I don't think that that was just from his first year in the NFL. He talked about how much they scouted Bryce Young even in Tampa, even knowing that they weren't going to have a chance at getting him, right?
True.
You know what I bet he saw on that tape a lot? And what a lot of Panthers fans have been clamoring for this team to do? I bet he saw John Mechie going out there and providing that target for Bryce as a route runner, as a separator, as a deep threat, but that wasn't necessarily where he made his hay, right? He was more in that intermediate range.
You're right.
I think that I could almost make the correlation between Deontay Johnson being the NFL proven version of John Mechie type of player for Bryce Young. So if you look at it from a stance of we're going to take something he's very comfortable with and which he's found success in at his highest level of success, and then we're going to take an element that I, the head coach, and my offensive staff have found success in at the highest level. Why don't we make this nice mesh of that? And then you talk about the tight ends. We ran 11 personnel, 87% of snaps last season.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay ran 12 personnel for about 26% of snaps last season.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the proclivity of not being able to be a great run blocker, well, first Dave already said in pressers, right? Look, we do a lot of chips. Right. He's like, it's not as important to us, dude. We do chips and bring guys in motion. Like, it's a lot of secondary combo type of blocks. Like, we're not asking him to be a 280-pound mauler. He's like, those guys are great. Yeah. You know, we got Ian Thomas. Maybe he'll be that for us. But they want that 12 personnel where they can be multiple, and having a guy like Tommy Tremble that if you can motion JT Sanders over to that side with him and they do a nice combo block on like a pull concept, right? And you get guys out in space. That's why they put the emphasis on getting a guy like Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis and guys that can move, but are big, strong guys that are prolific run blockers, but also excel in pass blocking. And Damian Lewis is familiar with the scheme.
Yeah.
I think for me, man, on the offense, my biggest question mark at this point is still Austin Corbett. But we heard some really promising things from beat reporters the past few days. And I get it, dude. It's shorts and helmets, no pads, right? No contact. But they talked about his ability in space and how quick he looked.
Yeah.
That's critical, man, because that is where Bradley Bozeman fell flat, like almost literally. I mean, as a pun, but also for real. He fell flat on his ass a couple times trying to execute those motion blocks, right?
Yeah.
Those movement blocks. He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
If Corbett can do that and you open up, I know that the Tampa Bay run game wasn't dominant, at least not at the beginning of the season. They found their footing a little bit, though, man. If you go back and you watch Rachaad White, he was doing a lot of the same things, but that offensive line started gelling a little bit more. They started really knowing where they were supposed to be, and they were playing together.
Yeah.
And that playing together, I know I'm transitioning all over the place here, but I also just want to touch on all this because it kind of does work together. And this is the whole beautiful part about football. If you talk about one thing, you should be able to tie that in to the other 10 guys that are on that side of the ball.
It all works together.
It all works together, man. That's the only way you find ultimate success. So when I look at Ikem Ekwonu, that's the other huge question mark that I have. Last year, we didn't have a whole lot of option, man, about sticking with Ikem Ekwonu, right? We were down to our 26th offensive guard that we had to play. like we were literally like signing guys out of like an Aldi parking lot. We were like, hey, I see you bought a baguette. Would you like to come and block for Bryce Young? But this year, we've got our two guards cemented, right? We've got Taylor Moton over there. We're moving Corbett over. We'll see how that works out. But what it does is it frees up Brady Christensen as a potential tackle replacement if you need him. Right. And then you also bring in Yosh from the Green Bay Packers. I think what they did a really smart thing of here is they tightened Icky's leash up a lot by changing that offensive line. And they said, hey, look, if you come out, man, and you don't improve, and I mean like drastically and visually improve, noticeably improve, we're not going to sit there and just say, well, we invested a top 6 pick in you, because they didn't invest a top 6 pick in him.
They did not.
They don't got anything to do with him.
No.
They're going to look at him and say, you know what we invested in? We invested in Yosh. We'll bring him over here and let him play left tackle and see if he does the same revolving door trick that you like to do. Right. I am hopeful that Icky takes a step. He has a lot of self-awareness to be able to be candid enough and talk about not being prepared enough last year. It also rubbed me the wrong way a little bit.
That made me so mad. That made me so mad, bro. Like,
tell me about it. Tell me how that made, like, honestly, because I think that you probably have very similar feelings to me. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I was pissed because we watched the preseason, right? Like everyone else, saw Icky's rookie year. I always thought that he would be a better interior lineman than a tackle, right? When I looked at the prospects that year, but I knew he was a top tackle prospect. He had all the athleticism and traits. He was a mauler, and we had Matt Rule who wanted to run the football, so I got it, right? And so in his first season with us, that's what we did. Even after Matt Rule got fired, I think we even leaned into the heavy run game, play action off the run game. I think those things played to Icky's strengths. And because he was the enforcer, for the most part, and even when we passed, it was out of play action. I think, the edges he faced, they were a little bit hesitant because they thought everything was coming at them. So I was hopeful that whoever we was going to hire head coach, when we hired Frank Wright, and even when Frank Wright became the head coach, I was hopeful that they were going to stay with the power run game and that Icky would, stay to his strengths. Same thing with Bozeman. We spoke about those two guys. They both struggled, with the whole zone blocking thing that they had to do last year. So Icky was exposed, just like Bozeman was. But I was frustrated because in the preseason, and I know it's just the preseason, everybody was like, oh, Panthers culture, this is vanilla, man. And, that's a coverage block. I mean, it's a coverage sack, man. I was like, nah, bro, like the dude got whooped. I mean, he got whooped several times in the preseason, and I was trying to call it out, but everybody was telling me I was tripping. And so
all those defensive linemen, man, they were Terrence Crawford. They were whooping feet, right?
And when the season began, the real action began, and the vanilla offense went away, and the real snaps were being played. Guess what was happening? The same thing that was happening in the preseason. When I thought it was bad, it was actually bad, and Bryce was getting murdered. But
it actually mattered.
It mattered, and now, see, I mean, I think a problem we have as fans is that we draft Icky number 6 overall, I believe, and so we automatically think problem solved. We hired we drafted a great guy, a great talent, great prospect. He's automatically going to be an all-pro left tackle.
And he's from North Carolina. We love that.
He's from North Carolina, so he's North Carolina State. Oh my God, he's the man, because I watched a lot of Wolfpack football. No. He has to be able to prove it, and he wasn't proving it in year 2. And I was trying to it doesn't matter what I say or what I think is right or wrong. It's just the fact that he was putting my quarterback at risk. It don't matter who the quarterback was. It could be Sam Darnold. It could be Baker Mayfield. We drafted you to be the left tackle, and you're not doing that.
Hey, we've seen Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, all these guys. We've seen what they look like when their offensive lines don't play well.
They struggle.
You can neutralize an alien, and you can definitely neutralize a Sam Darnold, right?
And that's what I'm saying. So what do we expect? Bryce Young to do when his left tackle, I could deal with the replacement left guard and replacement right guard struggle.
It's almost expected.
Yeah, but not Icky. And I know he was just a second-year player and all that, but for him to come in this offseason and basically admit that I thought I was a made man, after the first year, and so I really didn't, approach it the way whatever he said, man, I was like, oh my God, you're actually saying it. You're saying what I felt. and when he did it, I was like, oh, you such a scrub to me now. Because the whole time we were struggling, the whole time your quarterback behind you was struggling, the whole time this thing was dysfunctional, it wasn't because you were getting coached bad or you were getting developed bad, or the scheme and the communication, wasn't clear.
Yeah.
It was that you weren't playing up to your highest potential because you thought that you were good. And that's like, man, I'm telling you, like, I hope that he has a short leash this year.
Yeah. What would your leash be for him, man? Like if look, and I hate like quantifying some of these things, right? Because there's always context. Yeah. He faces a pretty significant gauntlet the first 5 weeks. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I know that he's got Bosa and Mac in week 2 because we play the Chargers at home in week 2. I know that he's got Max Crosby, I believe, week 5. And I think that there's 2 or 3 other premier edge rushers that we face in the first 5 weeks of the season. If he is just getting ransacked to start that stretch, do you give him any other leadway, or do you say, hey, look, 4 or 5 games is enough? You yank him.
I think you yank him because I believe that you have to, like, first of all, you have to protect your quarterback, right? Yeah. You have to protect, the product that you are putting on the field as a head coach. Like, I'm the play caller. Like, if this isn't working, then I look bad.
You're making me look like an asshole, Icky.
And Dave Canales hasn't looked bad yet in his career, right? We can all agree to that. Everything that you going back to Russell Wilson in Seattle,
been intelligent football moves.
Like he makes smart moves, smart adjustments, from what we can tell. And so if now he's in his first role as a head coach and he is the play caller, he is the play designer, all of the above, and that offense isn't working, it's not going to be just about Bryce Young and, how he's vulnerable to being hit and, hurt. It's going to be Dave Canales fighting for his reputation as a head coach and one of the up-and-coming young offensive minds. And so if Icky is putting all of that at risk, then he's going to have to de-risk, right? And then put in one of these guys who's proven they can be at least manageable at left tackle, like Yosh and or Brady Christensen maybe. And so I would want him. I mean, I don't know what I hope for. I hope that Icky plays up to his potential, whatever that is. I hope that he plays up to that potential, and that we have that position sorted, for at least the next decade or so. But to gauge, what would make me pull him, I think if he gives up, a couple of multiple sack games and not just multiple sack games,
high pressures,
just the game plan was wrecked because of what they were doing to him. Right. If that happens multiple times in the first half of the season, I think you got to pull him. Right. And so, that's that on that. My man made me mad, man, when he came out and admitted that. I wish he wouldn't have said that.
No, I'm with it, man, because look, that can be a self-awareness realization that you have internally and be like, man, I really could have done so much more. But to come out and lay it out on the line like that is just a crazy thing to say. Because first of all, man, I didn't think that he had this, write it off as one of the best offensive lineman rookie seasons of all time.
Wasn't that good.
Right? Yeah, he wasn't that great. Like he was solid for a rookie offensive tackle. I would have had no problem with that performance because we know that is a position that takes some acclimating for the most part, right? You don't normally see guys come in and become a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro player their first or second seasons. But to come in and say I was riding the coattails, man, you were riding the coattails of like a C. And if you're satisfied in riding coattails on an average grade, that makes me very nervous for the prospect of what happens if you do have a decent year this year. Are you going to get complacent again? Because that's where you're all of a sudden going to be open for another contract. I don't want my team investing a bunch of money into somebody that is satisfied with complacency. You know what I mean? That makes me a little bit nervous. All right, so I'm going to bring up just a quick little video montage. This is all stuff that the Panthers social media team put out. And while we finish up the OTA stuff, I'm just going to let this run because it's always nice to have a little visual back and see what, the work these guys have been putting in. There you go, Clowney, man. Look, I'll tell you something else, dude. When I watch the blueprint, the energy that this football team has is so starkly different than anything I saw with Frank running the show last year. And I don't mean to pile on Frank Reich, man. By all accounts, he seems like a very nice guy, right? He didn't have control of this football team, man. And they took on the personality of their coach, and our coach didn't have the personality of a winning football coach. I mean, they're having fun. Like there seems to be a sense of camaraderie, a sense of team. They're buying in, and you hear Canales, man. One thing I love about him is that he's got a real, not passive aggressive. I wouldn't say that because he's so direct, but he's got these really funny subliminals in the way that he'll word stuff when he says like, look, I'm just really excited about the guys that are here and that are putting in effort, that are really buying into what we're doing. I'm talking specifically to an Eddie Pinheiro and Clavon Chason. The Eddie Pinheiro thing, man, is funny, and we could talk on it real quickly because I know that you and I've seen your tweets about it, and I'm sure you have seen mine as well. I don't have any interest, man, and I don't mean to sound bad about this. I know that he's got like the top 3 or whatever percentage since coming into the league. That's great. If you look at the quantity, the volume of kicks compared to those other guys, it is incredibly different. But seeing a guy come out and shoulder shrug like, hey, you shouldn't have put me out there to kick that kick. I have never once in my life, JJ, I've watched football. I'm 36 years old. I have never once in my life seen a player come out and been like, I don't know why you asked me to do that when you were asking them to do their job. Like that pains me to see, and it instills no confidence in the fact that we can't find somebody to do that same thing better. You know what I mean? Like Harrison Mevis is not some globetrotter that you get and you expect it to be Justin Tucker. That's not the insinuation that I want to make. Yeah. But if it's about Eddie being great at kicking 42-yard field goals, I don't really want to have to settle a whole ton for ending the drive at the 25-yard line anyways. You know what I mean? Like, I want to have a better offense. Where I want my kicker to be able to help my team is when we get to the 40 and we're either having to give another possession to the opponent or we walk away with 3 points. I want to feel safe, or at least like remotely confident that the kicker has the ability. Maybe he doesn't make it, man, because look, it's not a sure thing. No, but if he at least has the ability, Eddie literally went out there and was like, hey, you guys know I can't do that. Why did you put me out there? That's a crazy thing for a kicker to do. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, bro, like we on the same page. And let me say this about Eddie Pinheiro, right? We only arrived at Eddie Pinheiro because our kicker got hurt in the preseason, if I remember correctly, right? And so, and there was a reason.
Zane Gonzalez,
Zane Gonzalez got hurt on the sideline on that booty field that we have in Charlotte, if I remember correctly. Warming up. And so Eddie didn't have a job, right? And so only in Charlotte, only in Carolina, where a dude can just come off the couch and, add to those, those nuanced, high percentage numbers that he has. And become like a folk hero, for the Carolina Panthers. And everybody like, oh, where's Eddie? Like, we got to have Eddie. No, you don't. I was here in Atlanta at that game when Eddie broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Oh, man. Because he missed. It wasn't a chip shot, because of the penalty, but like it was still an extra point that was very makeable in a dome in perfect conditions.
You make that damn kick, dude. Look, you can say it's not a chip shot if you want to, JJ, because you're a nicer person than me. Make that damn kick, dude. You're a professional kicker.
You make that kick every time in the dome.
Make that kick.
But okay, okay, it's cool.
Yep.
You missed that one. One of the most, I don't know, slandered players in the recent history for the Carolina Panthers, Henderson, gets an interception in overtime and puts us back in field goal position to win the game about 5 minutes later. And it's an easy field goal to make. Man, I was on the 10-yard line when that kick went up, and I was talking so much trash to the fans in my section, all the Atlanta fans.
Yeah.
And when he kicked it, I turned around and started yelling and laughing at everybody in the section and was ready to walk out with my son. And then they were looking stunned as fans. And I turned around to see what happened because I thought it went through from my angle. And he had missed it. And I was like, oh, my God. And so eventually we lose the game. And, man, I'm going to tell you, like, one of the lowest points in my life as a fan. I drive back up 85 north towards where I live, right, with the rest of the sad Panthers fans.
Right.
But I have to stay here in Atlanta. And so I get off at the exit so I can get some gas before I get to the house. And I happen to be gassing up beside a fellow Falcons fan.
Oh, man.
But when the guy saw me in my gear, all he said from across the pump was, "Man, I'm sorry, bro."
God,
and I said,
that's a division rival that is looking at you and empathizing with you.
He said, "Man, I'm sorry, bro." He was like, "I wasn't at the game, but my brother was, and I just talked to him, and he told me how that game ended, and I actually feel sorry for you, dog." And I said, "Man, I don't even know how to feel about it." That was gutting. And to be here in Atlanta, to have one of these fans who I always go back and forth with, for one of them to look me in the eye at a gas pump on a Sunday evening and tell me, "I'm sorry, bro."
That's remarkable. That's remarkable in the worst possible way.
And I was like, you know what? I hate you, Eddie.
Yeah.
But
Seriously.
but I don't. I'm glad that he was able to recover later that year. I'm glad that Steve Wilkes, trusted him, again when he needed him, and all this other stuff that happened down the stretch. But I'm over it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm over it. Like, he was here, for another season, and that was cool.
Yeah.
But it
was a down season though. It was a down season. Like he had a good year in 2022.
Yeah.
That is the outlier for him.
Yeah.
If you look at his career, that was the year that he hangs his hat on. It wasn't last year. It's the extra point misses that he has and stuff. Those things matter a lot. But I'll end this because I don't want to spend the rest of this episode talking about Eddie Pinheiro for crying out loud. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But because it does make us seem crazy as a fan base too, that like we're getting ourselves all kinds of riled up over Eddie Pinheiro versus Harrison Mevis. But the difference is Eddie Pinheiro, if he ends up winning the competition, I'm going to treat him the same way that I treated Sam Darnold when he was our quarterback. I am going to root for him to absolutely knock it out every single week. I'm going to root for him to hit every single kick and make me look like a dumbass for saying that I wanted the thicker kicker to come out and win that job. Like, I really don't care who the kicker is, to be completely honest, man. Like, if there is a guy working down here at the local 7-Eleven that has a boot on him, bring him in, dude. I really could care less.
Do your job.
Just do your job, man. And for kickers, they have a one central job. It is a lot different than talking about any other position on this roster. It is a job that they do on their own. And I know that can be pressure filled. I know that can be a mental hurdle for a lot of them to overcome. And that's a thing that Eddie had to overcome too. But to hear him come in those pressers and do this whole thing about like, well, hey, have you had a chance to talk to Harrison Mevis? Oh, no, hi and bye type of thing. Okay. Look, I'm just going to be completely honest, man. I'm cool with saying hi and bye after this offseason program with Eddie Pinheiro too, myself. All right. One last position, man, that I want to talk about before we wrap this thing up, because I thank you very much, man, for your time. First of all, when we first talked about this, we were talking about doing a short little thing. I had an idea, JJ, I'm not going to lie to you, had an idea that when you and I started talking football, both of us have no problem gabbing. That is a thing that I think everyone around us would probably attest to.
Yeah.
I don't find it as a bad thing when I enjoy the company that I'm sitting here talking to.
Same.
But you've given me an hour. I don't want to hold you up too much longer. So, let me get into this last thing. Edge rusher is a position that I am extremely nervous about with this Carolina Panthers team. Yeah. I'll go into it like this, though, that I understand the context and the nuance of having to put a great deal of eggs in the offensive basket to figure out what we have after giving up assets, after giving up draft picks, after really building an offense around Bryce Young. I totally understand the reasoning behind it. I'm not going to argue it. Yeah. But I also, like we've talked about, I watch the game of football. I don't just watch offense and then take defense off and like go outside and finish smoking the wings. I watch both sides of it, right? I watch all three aspects, but the offense and defense is where you watch most of it. Defense matters in football, man. Like it plays a huge part, and it does have a giant ramification to what your offense will be doing, how often they are on the field, what kind of situational aspects they're in playing. So what you are asking of your offense. If our edge group is missing DJ Wanham to start, I don't know what his recovery is, but he's still recovering from a pretty serious torn quad. That's a significant injury.
It is.
Amari Barno is coming off of an ACL tear that we found out about in OTAs.
Yeah.
We've got Jadeveon Clowney. I love that. I love that addition. Terrific run defending edge. He had his best individual statistic year as a pass rusher last season in Baltimore. Part of that probably can be attested to the scheme and the talent around him in Mike McDonald's defense. But I don't want to take it away from Jadeveon either, because there's a lot that has been said about that just makes it seem like he only had that success because of Mike McDonald's scheme and because of Justin Baduke. You know what I mean? Like there's more to it than that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know that I feel super comfortable about him being the only one to generate pressure a la Brian Burns the past few years, right? Different ball player. Iku Leota is a guy that I was high on making the 53-man as an undrafted free agent last season. He made the roster, had a very minimal impact. Thought that maybe he would get a good opportunity this season with some of these injuries. He's nursing a calf injury. And for me, that's perplexing, a little bit troubling, because he also had a calf strain before the 2023 combine circuit. He's had significant chest injury, ended his 2022 season at Auburn. The guy's dealt with injuries. So it is concerning, right?
Yeah.
So then you look at it, man, and we're looking at Clavon Chason and DJ Johnson as the guys out there to round that out. Clavon did not show up for OTAs. He was catching tennis balls, though, to be fair. He was catching tennis balls and doing like hip dances and stuff like that. So that's good. Just in case we get into a situation where there's a tennis ball throw off, like at least we got that ringer on our team. DJ Johnson just went down with a knee injury. He was carted off. Sounds like it was a lot of precautionary carting him off. They see he's not too serious.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of projection if we're banking on DJ Johnson to be that complementary player on the other side. And I think that they are. I think that they're going to end up having to rely on him a lot. What is your read on look, Evero makes his money, dude, in the secondary. We know that, right? Yeah. That is where he is the best. That's where he excels. And we have a secondary that I feel relatively good about, to be completely honest. I like JC Horn a ton. If he's healthy, that's a top 10 quarterback in the league if he's healthy.
Yeah.
Jordan Fuller, I thought, was a terrific signing. I mean, you talk about a heartbeat of the Rams defense and how much Sean McVay and those guys speak highly of him. That dude is going to be a difference maker, man. And he's going to bring a mentality that defense is going to like. Xavier Woods is finally starting to get some flowers. I think that he's a very solid player. He may not be exemplary. He may not stand out all the time. Very solid ball player. Yeah. And then you take a guy like Dane Jackson. I'm okay with it. I'm not going to sit there and write it in my journal before I go to bed that we got Dane Jackson and I'm super pumped about it. Well, but I think that he's an adequate ball player, right?
Yeah, let me say this about Dane Jackson. I'm like you. I don't think, this is a person like I went at Dante Jackson every week almost. I remember that a little bit. but Dane Jackson.
Yeah.
Sean McDermott trusted Dane Jackson to play outside corner for him.
That's right.
And I know it happened because of I think Trey White got injured.
Right.
And so he had to step up and play that role. But, Sean McDermott could have found somebody else to play that role. I mean, he could have went out and got somebody to play that role, but he trusted Dane Jackson to play outside corner for him. I'm not saying that's going to be somebody we can trust. Obviously, they've been flirting with the idea of Stephon Gilmore. But I think if we have to start the season with J.C. Horn, Jordan Fuller, Xavier Woods, and Dane Jackson, I would trust that secondary. But, going back to your original point about the edge position, obviously I've been wanting Jadeveon Clowney to come back home, for the past 5 seasons. And, he said that he didn't come back home before because he didn't think he was mature enough. And I respect that.
Yeah.
It's too close to home. And I get that. I'm from upstate South Carolina.
That's the kind of personal candidness that I want to hear from a player, not I just wasn't doing enough work, so I didn't want to come back here.
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that you felt like if you'd have came back as a younger man,
Right.
then you might not have done, as well.
Something
Yeah, it
else
might have
just
been
could
some
have kept you from
distractions.
it.
There's just too many things going on when
Yep.
you're around the old now, I mean, but I love the fact that he came back home. I think it gives our defense just more credibility, because I think regardless of what Jadeveon Clowney hasn't done in terms of sack numbers around the league, I think he's like one of those dudes that when other NFL dudes, line up across from him,
Get around
I think
him,
they
yeah.
respect the fact that you are a dude, like you are a real dude. And so so obviously, he's the alpha edge now. Is he Brian Burns? No. I think, they're totally different. Like you said, I mean, he's more of a run defender. He was speaking at the press conference, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where he was saying that he takes pride. Yeah, he takes pride. He takes pride in basically just lining up across from the man, across from him, and just saying, like, you're not gonna do it, you're not gonna do what you want to me.
That bodes well too for DJ Johnson learning that, because they drafted DJ Johnson with that as the intention for him, right?
Yeah,
like that was where they saw him. Yeah.
Be an edge setter, be a run stopper. And this is what I want to say. I mean, I know, every day a different fan, and sometimes the same fan or two, wake up on Twitter and, want to complain about how bad the defense is going to be. And, like I'll say this. I mean, if you followed me for a while, I used to say it more than I say it now. I live and die by defense. Like, I really, for as long as I've watched football, I've really not ever really gotten much into like the offensive side of football. Like, I'm not a person who breaks down the S's and O's of what offenses do and what they like to do and this quarterback. Like, I hate all that quarterback offensive talk. Like, I want to like punish people. And I believe that starts with a defense who likes to get after it. Unfortunately, I don't see our defense in a position to like be top 5, like I like. But I do respect that we have a defense that I feel on paper that you can't run against. And that's one of the things that like irks me more than anything, is the fact that teams can run at me or at my team, and control the ball game. And I believe that teams have been able to do that whenever they want it, even if the numbers don't show it. I believe teams have really decided to control the ball game against us for the last several years, aside from when Wilkes was in control. But I still remember even when Wilkes was
then, man, we got gouged.
You remember Cincinnati got us like that?
Yep.
Early in
we were down like 42-7 or something at one point in that game.
Yeah. And Dallas early in
Joe
that
Mixon
year,
Joe Mixon had like 5 touchdowns in that game, if I remember right.
A career day. And I was playing against him in fantasy that day. Like, I was double pissed. And so when I look at the way defenses are built, the first thing I want to do, more than sack the quarterback, I want to stop the run, right? And so that's not being talked about enough. I think A'Shaun Robinson being on the other side of Derrick Brown, and in that interior 3, with Tuttle, who might be projected to be the nose tackle. I love the fact that, first of all, Derrick Brown and Tuttle have like this great relationship.
They do, right? That almost makes me feel better about Tuttle than I did. I didn't feel good about Tuttle, man. I'm gonna completely level here. He did not have a good year last season, and I think he's playing out of position. But there's something about that dynamic that makes me feel like now we've seen that. Maybe that takes some pressure off of Tuttle, man. Maybe he comes in and he starts playing differently, man.
Yeah, because like I'm best friends, best guys with the dude who is the defensive face of the franchise, right?
Correct.
So if this dude likes me, I'm good. And so Derek likes him. And now you have a grizzled vet like A'Shaun on the other side of that, right?
Yep.
And so
the guys behind him also play a huge part in this. We're talking about, and I'm sorry, man, maybe you were getting to this. I didn't mean but I got excited thinking about it because I'm a huge fan of Shaq Thompson, obviously. Like that's our captain. We lost Frankie Louvu, man, and Frankie Louvu to me was the soul of that defense last season. In the past 2 seasons, I hate that Frankie Louvu is not here in Carolina. I think that he still could be, but Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson, they are going to bring a hammer to that aspect of that position that we did not have with Kamu Grugier-Hill and Frankie. And now Frankie was playing out of position, right?
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. And that was the point I was getting to, when it came to
Frankie. My bad. I'm so overzealous, man, when we start talking.
No. It's cool though, because I think, at least I think, and you probably weren't going to say the same thing I was going to say, but in case you were, I believe that Jewell, right? Jewell had his most productive season with EJ a couple years ago. So that's thing one, right? Obviously, I think they wanted to keep Louvu, but, they had parameters and
he wanted a different role. Yeah.
He wanted a different role. I hate to say it, and I'm sorry for whoever's listening. I was a little bit relieved. Because I like Louvu. I personally believe Louvu should have been rushing the passer. I always did. I thought he had the ability to drop back and cover, play off ball. I just don't think that was his strength, even though he made plays from that position. And I
think you're right, though, that's his most effective and impactful way of adding to a defense and contributing to a defense is as that blitzkrieg player, right? Yeah. Like causing chaos. And that's what he wanted to do. My gripe with it, man, because I agree with you, but I gotta say my piece and push back just a little bit because I love Frankie so much. Was my gripe was, why did the Panthers not figure out a way to do that with him? Because the great defensive coordinators, and this isn't a slight to Evero, I believe in him very much, but like Mike Macdonald, man, you know how big of a fan I was of him in Baltimore and his. He would have
had 10 sacks with Mike Macdonald
easily, and he also would have looked very comfortable in the other aspects because of the scheme that he would have devised. It's the way that Kyle Hamilton looked completely out of place in the NFL for his first season. And then Mike Macdonald takes him and says, dude, you're a freak talent. What are we doing trying to make you do this one thing when you can do 7 things way better? And then once people are expecting you to do those 7, we'll drop you back in that area where you didn't look good, but you'll have a much more opportunistic advantage in it, right? Well, that's what I wanted for Frankie.
The one thing I know about Evero is that, if I believe I'm tracking him correctly, he is a Fangio disciple, right?
Yep.
So Fangio plays a very basic defense. He just plays that very basic defense very well, right?
Yep.
And so within that very basic defense, his defenders, especially his inside linebackers, have very specific roles. They can rush the passer, but their responsibility is to be off ball, right? And so them going and lining up on the edge to rush from the outside and do that, you don't see a lot of that in Fangio's defense, and nor did you see it in Louvu's defense. That's why you had the sack numbers come down, in my opinion. And so if you're not going to use Louvu, like this wild card, that he was before, then go get you a guy that plays position the way that you want it played. And so the I don't believe we lost all that much in losing Louvu when it comes to,
if we were going to deploy him the same manner that we
if we're going to use him the exact same way we used him in 2023.
That's fair.
Then don't pay him $12.5 million to play him that way. Go pay Josie Jewell, who's comfortable playing the way that you want to play. He said that he played very well under Evero. So you can go pay half of that to go bring in the guy to play the position exactly how he wants to play.
By all accounts, Josie's playing pretty well so far, just in OTA and camp.
That's what I'm saying. No, and I like Josie in Denver, right? Never thought he was going to be a Panther. I don't think he's like one of these, blazing fast sideline to sideline guys, but he's always a guy that's in the right position.
He'll lay the lumber, and every now and then he can create a turnover, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I want. I don't need anything flashy at inside linebacker off ball, especially in Evero's defense. So, we're going to lose the cool tattoos and the hair and the attitude and the big pop plays. I thought he was a dog, but I'm not going to personally miss him. I'm not going to personally miss Brian Burns. Sorry for the Burns, people. I just don't
Look
think
at you, man. You waited until an hour and 20 into this thing to just drop the hammer and be like, I'm not going to miss any of them.
I'm not. I mean, but because I don't, man, I'm at the age now, and I've seen enough football and people come and go to where people leaving don't affect me. Because I think what I mentioned earlier about Dave Canales,
Yeah.
I think coaches eventually are trying to find out or find the players to do the things that they did when they were at other places. Evero went and got 3 guys that started for him in other places. Fuller, Jewell, Robinson. He knows.
Was it interesting to you that he couldn't get more out of Deshaun Williams? Because he tried to do that, right? He tried to go through that well and bring Deshaun from Denver with him last year.
Yeah.
And Deshaun just kind of underperformed. Now, I also think that it was just the grand scheme of everything around him too. But they didn't have any interest in even bringing him back. Was that surprising to you? Or do you think that they just looked at Ashawn and said, hey, look, here's a guy that's available that is a clear upgrade to what we want that position to be able to do, and maybe even provides a little more versatility along that defensive front?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year was like a fill it out year for Evero, and even though, Williams had that experience, I just think that even though you bring in a guy that has experience with you, if you can get a guy who's better than that guy, then you go get upgraded.
And you do it, right?
Yeah,
does it scare you at all that they're putting the emphasis on like building Evero's guys, right? Like his system and like really getting everything comfortable for the way that he wants to succeed, with the high probability that come next season he's not here? Like, does
I'm not that confident he's going to be gone though. Like,
ooh,
I mean, and I hate saying that, to be honest. I think the only way Evero leaves is if we have success. If you look at the defensive coordinators who got hired this past cycle, they were coming from playoff teams. They weren't coming from sorry teams. It doesn't matter if there were a good defense on the bad team. The guys who got picked up as D coordinators were McDonald.
That's fair.
My man Raheem Morris down here in Atlanta, coming from the Rams. They were a playoff team. You go the year before that, it was D'Amico. Who else did you say?
Dan Quinn.
Yeah, Dan Quinn came from the Cowboys. Another defense coordinator came
who also has head coaching previous experience. The same with Raheem as well.
A great resume, Super Bowl appearance. So Evero would have to experience a really good year in Carolina, and that's with everything else clicking. And we make a playoff run or a division run for him,
or at least like a clear top 12 type of statistical season. Like there would have to be some sort of major accolades that you could point to and say, this is why we're still high on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, and then other thing, like look how many vacancies got filled this year. I mean, how many more would need to be filled next year? So so Evero, I hope he gets his shot when it's time. I'm just not threatened by the fact that he's building up this defense, in his scheme and his image, and then he might have to roll out, and then we have to figure something else out after that. But even if he did, bro, like I think the core pieces of our defense are still very scheme versatile.
Well, and they've got some coaches behind him too. Tim Lakubu, I like him a lot. I think that he could be a name in waiting. I know a lot of people are very high on Chris Cooley. I don't disagree with that. I think that he's young into it, but I think that he's a good prospect for coaching candidacy. But hey, maybe EJ Evero, maybe he pulls a Ben Johnson for us, and he's just like, I got a good thing cooking here in Carolina. Man.
That's if we're building and winning. But you already know the answer to this whole situation. You know the answer to what's going to happen. If Evero leaves, what is Dave Canales going to do?
Yeah,
where is he going? Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Like, what is he going to do? I
don't know, man.
Bro, he's going right back to that Seattle.
Is he though?
Yeah, like without a doubt. But
okay, so I'm trying to think of
Chris Richard,
Gus Bradley, like anybody who's from that lineage is coming to Carolina. That's fair. Yeah,
fair. I mean, and nobody should be shocked by that. I would think that he would take whoever comes from that lineage, who's probably adapted their scheme away from that, that cover 3 that they like to do in Seattle, and still might have some concepts of that, but
Right.
has adapted it to what's going on in the league now that the league is kind of adjusted to it a little bit.
The only way I could see him pivoting away from that, because you bring up a good point, and that is a very natural way for him to go, right?
Yeah.
The only way that I could see him going away from that, though, is if there is a nice year again this season, right? Like if these players perform very well in this system, and this is the second, third year for some of these players in this system, right? If they do well with it again, for continuity's sake and for the sake of Canales being able to say, hey, look, we took a step on offense, but we didn't take a leap. I still have a lot of work to do here on this side that I don't want to have to put any extra time and effort into new system and attending meetings and figuring out what's going on over on that side. Maybe for continuity's sake, I could see him saying, if this coach, this assistant, whether it's Tim, whether it's Cooley, whether it's D'Angelo Hall, maybe gets a look, right? Who knows what he looks at? Hanson, the linebackers coach, he's got some head coaching experience in college. Maybe they look at it and they just say, for continuity's sake, man, I want to keep the same system in place. I want to re-sign as many of these players as we can, and I want to run it back because our offense is getting better. So instead of implementing another new thing, let's see what 2 years of the same thing looks like instead of always having this turnaround, right? That's the only way that I could see him doing that.
I mean, and I would be fine with that, but I think it's all about identifying the right guy from that staff who isn't necessarily tethered to Evero, because I think Evero would take whoever his top lieutenant with him and make him his defensive coordinator.
Right.
And so you're going to lose that guy. So it's all about who's the next guy, right?
Yep.
And because that guy won't get a defensive coordinator position. So you have to get like Evero's second lieutenant and then go with him. Let me see if I can find my thing. But yeah, that's where you go with that. And and I would go and look for the best defensive coordinator though. I wouldn't worry so much about the scheme and keep the scheme because if you got like a top tier defense and you got like a secondary coach or a linebackers coach or a defensive line coach from that unit, like, say if it's in Dallas or San Francisco or Kansas City, if you got somebody from one of those staffs or Baltimore staff or now Mike McDonald's staff in Seattle, if you got somebody who can bring that to your team, go get that guy and figure it out, because you're still going to have Derek Brown. Hopefully you still have J.C. Horn. You're still going to have Shaq Thompson. You're still going to have Xavier Woods, hopefully. So you have like these key pieces that can still adapt to this new scheme. If the scheme is good, the players are good, we're still going to have to go out and find us an edge anyway. So, just go get the best defense coordinator. And
that's a good point. There's going to be a priority on building the defense, whether it's through the draft or through free agency. They're going to put a little bit more resources towards that defense, that if they do have to start over with a different coordinator or a different scheme, whatever it is, they bring in somebody that says, hey, look, now you've got an opportunity that, unless there's like a prolific receiver or something that falls, right, or an offensive tackle, if Icky doesn't pan out, that you say, hey, we'll use that first pick on. I know. I hate to like always giggle when I say something about Icky not panning out, but like I do really get nervous about that, man. Like that still seems like that Achilles heel that could just derail all of my optimism. Would be if we come out week 1 and week 2 and every stunt they run, dude is just like, it looks like he has his shoes tied to it together, right? Like he just can't move to the side.
Let me ask you a real question, man.
Oh no.
And this isn't negative, but I'm gonna flip it on you for a second.
Okay.
And this is probably your last. I mean, I know for me, might be my last time talking on the show. Heading into the dog days of summer, between now and training camp. But as we head into training camp and ahead of the preseason and the season, like, just go as inward as you can to the depths of your heart, depths of your mind, all of your logic, and tell me the 2 things that concern you most about our offense. Players, 2 players that concern you most on our offense. Who are they?
It's Ikem Ekwonu.
Yeah.
And it has to be Bryce Young.
I'm glad that you were telling the truth.
And look, that's the truth of it. And it's not there are also two different answers. Can I give just a little bit of like nuance to my answer so that I don't feel as bad about them? So Icky, it's because I have a lot of doubt.
Yeah.
That's why I have nervousness about that and why I think he's a pivotal piece, right?
Yeah.
I don't have as much doubt about Bryce Young personally.
Yeah.
I think that Bryce Young is a very good quarterback. I think that he's a very good football player.
Yeah.
I still look at it's hard for me to erase my evaluation of Bryce Young from my belief in him.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we talked about this at the beginning of the show, that I have such a hard time with some people almost hedging their bet and their evaluation on Bryce, where beforehand they had him as a top 10 consensus pick, right?
Yeah.
There has to be talent to classify somebody and put your name behind saying somebody should be a top 10 pick. Whether it's the elite physical traits or whatever it is, there has to be something that says that, or else you should just go against the grain instead of going with it and say, no, man, this dude is not a first round pick. I did that this year with Bo Nix, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was so high on Bo Nix. He was like my 134th overall prospect. And I only did 150 officially, right? Yeah. I did not see it, man. And I might have egg all over my face for that, but I'm going to stand on it because that's what my grading, that's what my evaluation told me that I think of this player. For Bryce Young, man, I gave him the same process that I gave everybody else. And at the end of the day, he ended up my quarterback one. And that was in a good quarterback class. CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson were very good prospects. Yeah. Like maybe they're not the generational. I hate the generational term anyways, but they were really high-end quarterback prospects. And Bryce cleared them for me by a minuscule amount, but he had it.
Yeah.
It is hard for me to ignore that when I'm looking at the prospect of Bryce Young, but it is impossible for me to ignore what his rookie season was. Right. So until I am able to put all of the context and give a fair evaluation this year, which is one of the things we spoke about, I think this year is that. I think it's a real opportunity. And I hate to sound like a apologist, but it feels a lot like a rookie year for Bryce Young. It is a quasi rookie year where he has the experience of failure behind him that he can harken back to and use as a tool. But as far as projecting in his trajectory in the NFL, I don't think you can take a lot from last year and expect that to translate. Where I'm nervous is if it does translate, we're in a world of hurt, because that is the stuff that cannot translate. Some of the things he picked up later in the year, some of the footwork that I think got progressively worse. You know what I mean? I think that there were certain things that didn't start out as fluky and as nervous and as anxious as it ended up. But one thing I trust about Canales and Idzik is their ability to connect on a personal level and on a football level with these players. I think that will benefit a person like Bryce Young very much. Bryce Young is such a intuitive, caring human being from everything that I've seen. And he takes things to heart and has a lot of weight and responsibility on himself. That's his initiative with the BY9 Foundation, the mental health aspect of it. Yeah. I think it speaks to how much he knows that pressure can burst pipes, right?
Yes.
That all of these things can really affect somebody's mental well-being that affects every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a coincidence, man. And I think that that is the mental makeup of somebody that can move past all of that shit of last year, to be completely honest. The physical aspects, yeah, man, got to prove it. But I saw enough in my evaluation that he should be able to do the things that he needs to do with the right pieces around him.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you named those two guys, because I think if the average fan who's really paying attention to the football team and where we are, I think if they were really real and objective and really looked across the board at position for position, with the addition of Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen returning, the running back room returning, and then plus Jonathan Brooks, being added, Sanders being added. Corbett, stepping into that center role, but they love
that was like 2B for me was
yeah,
Corbett.
yeah. No, and I was that's why I asked the question, because I felt like it could be three people, three players.
But what's the most important position on the football field, man? If we want to be completely honest, it's quarterback.
And so everything. I mean, this is how I feel, right? I feel so much pressure for Bryce Young, right? And because I do, and I love the guy. Like the best thing that could happen for the Carolina Panthers, and I'm gonna say this very loud, very clear. The best thing that can happen for the Carolina Panthers, for Dave Tepper and the entire fan base, is if Bryce Young is successful, because he is so many other good things. To where if he becomes the face of the franchise, if he becomes the starter for the next 10 to 15 seasons, if he brings success to Carolina, it's going to be so major for the rebrand of the Carolina Panthers.
100%.
Because he is the perfect guy to have out front for the fans, for the young generation of fans, because he's probably the most relatable type of guy that you can show a little kid, and that little kid can dream and say, I can be like Bryce Young.
I grew up with a VHS of Muggsy Bogues, and it said "Don't Tell Me No" was the name of the VHS, and I think of Steph Curry, right? And then you think of Bryce Young. I said when he was being drafted, man, he's not a generational talent. Like, let's get serious here. He's 5'10", 195 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, he can't be generational with those things. What he can be is transcendent.
That's right.
And that is almost more polarizing and gripping and impactful than generational, because generational happens every generation, if you want to go by the term, right? Transcendent, it changes things.
It changes the paradigm.
Changes everything, right? Like you said, there are going to be kids that look and say, this dude made it. This guy made it. And he's so approachable and relatable, man. I do hope it, man. Like, there is nobody that I have heard speak in the NFL recently. And then don't get me wrong, there's great guys that are winning awards and stuff like that, like Hayward for the Steelers. I absolutely love him. Every time that dude speaks, I think that it's some of the most inspirational and genuine talking that I've ever heard from a sports figure. But Bryce Young, it's something about his approach, man. It's something about the way that he is so self-aware and still yet so even-keeled and just good-natured that I want to see that success for him so badly, to show that you don't always have to have a certain persona to reach that gigantic climax, right? And that's he's not a prick. He's not egotistical. Like you said, he's super approachable. He's conscientious of mental health. He's been a small guy his whole life, right? And so, like that whole Steph Curry comparison. I've never been a big Steph Curry comparison to Bryce. I saw him as a player more like Chris Paul, right? That's right. Because of I think Steph drops bombs, Bryce don't drop bombs. Correct.
Chris is a distributor. I think Bryce is a distributor. But as a player who a generation of young fans can look at and say, I can be that guy. I always say, like a kid, even if it was Cam Newton, not to compare him to Cam Newton, but if you meet Cam Newton in person, I'm a 6 foot, 250 plus pound guy. Cam is huge to me, right? As a kid, he's huge. Even more huge to them, so he looks larger than life and looks, like a superhero almost. And like, I can't be that guy, but you can be Bryce Young. You can be Steph Curry. You can be Chris Paul. You might not be able to be LeBron James, right? But you can be Bryce Young. All I have to do is work hard. Study. Be intentional. Be a good natured person. Don't curse. All the good things about role models. Bryce can be that guy if he's just successful. That being said, I feel this immense pressure for him because I know he wants to do well. I know his family is invested in him doing well there in Charlotte. It was cool seeing his dad on that panel with him.
Love that.
His dad is I think he's a psychologist or something.
Yep.
And, like he's focused on mental health. I know that's a big part of Bryce's temperament, his maturation, his process,
it's a lot of his fabric of the way that he goes about everything.
Yeah. And that's why his answers and pressures are so thoughtful. He pauses before he speaks.
He does love to say super, doesn't he? Like, have you ever noticed, man? He's like, oh man, I'm super excited. I'm super thankful.
He just because I think he reinforces a lot of positivity. So
he also wants to show that he's genuine. I think so that like adjective before the noun, I think is him just being like, no, I want you to know how much I enjoy that.
How much I feel about this particular thing. So that being said about Bryce, I want to see him have success. I want fans to understand that Bryce's success doesn't have to look like everyone else's. And I think when we adjust to that, I think we will be healthier mentally as a fan base as to what Bryce's success should look like. We should compare Bryce's numbers or statistics, which is usually like the parametric, measuring thing, against his contemporaries, but Bryce's success should be measured in wins. And however they come, whatever his, end of year stats look like, however many wins he leads us to, I think that's what we should measure his success by. The article, that Nate Tice wrote, it compared him to Alex Smith. And I know a lot of people wouldn't like that. Most people who follow me knew I grew up a 49ers fan. I remember when they drafted Alex Smith and Aaron Rodgers on the board, right? I had
first overall, by the way.
Overall, Alex Smith, out of Utah, winner, athletic, leader, all the things.
He was a dual threat quarterback, man. An accurate dual threat quarterback is what they said.
Accurate dual threat quarterback.
That's right.
And Alex was all them things. Tough. He showed toughness.
Yeah, he was.
Really. He showed toughness, but they struggled to win. He struggled, from a production standpoint. Here comes Jim Harbaugh, and he instilled something in Alex that I had never seen before from Alex. He made him believe he was an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
And he was a different guy from that moment forward. I remember Jim patting him on the shoulder pass and, just psyching him up like, hey, look, we ready to play football. You're the guy, right?
Right.
I think with Bryce Young, I think we're going to get some of that via Dave Canales, even though it may not come the same way Jim gave it to Alex. I believe Dave Canales and his positivity. I believe Dave Canales and his enthusiasm. I believe Dave Canales and his overall just energy towards football is going to be something that Bryce looks at and says, okay, I can be that. I can be more energetic. And when I look at, like who he was with Frank Wright, I think Frank Wright comes in as like, to me, Frank Wright is like, like your Bible study pastor, right? Like he's the connect group pastor, the guy who pulls the group aside and, teaches you all the nuances of the Bible and, you want to live right for, you don't want to cuss around and, you just want to do everything the right way because he got that demeanor. It's like, I want to make you proud, and
I
don't want to disappoint you. I think Bryce coming into that situation and not knowing all the details behind the scenes about who the what's and whatever. I just think that Frank Wright was his coach. I think he respected him a lot. But I think he looked at him more like a father figure on the football team rather than the head coach. I think right now he looks at Dave Canales like a young, enthusiastic head coach who's very intentional about what he wants him to do, who he wants him to be. And I think that's going to help him become a better leader, a better football player, and a more productive football player. I just don't want Bryce going forward to have to be compared or thought to be, he got to be this top 5 guy or top 10 guy. Or
he's got to throw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns or else
he may not ever do that. Yeah, he may not ever do that.
And there are probably some statistical ranges that you could look at to determine success, especially for a player like him that isn't a overpowering physical player, right? You
I
could
would
look
say
at
TD.
his
I would
completion
say
percentage,
yeah. I would say TD. TD the
interceptions, right?
Completion percentage.
Right.
Yards per attempt.
Accuracy in certain areas of the field.
Yeah.
Right.
I would. Yeah. Overall QBR. Like I would look at numbers like that and say,
Correct.
Okay, like you are one of the top tier quarterbacks if you look at those measurements. No, those measurements.
Right. Those
it won't be about it won't be about like you said, 5,000 yard seasons, 40 plus touchdown seasons. Right. I'm not looking for that for Bryce Young. I want Bryce Young. I hate to say it. I want Bryce Young to be a game manager. Until we need to win a game.
Yeah.
And that's what most good quarterbacks are anyway. But
right.
I want him to be a game manager until the game is on the line and we have to win a game. And that's the beautiful thing about Bryce Young, in my opinion. Like when games were tight last year, he didn't get tight. He didn't get tight.
That's
and I believe in him. Like we weren't in those positions enough last year, but when we were, I was like, I think he can go down and get a score. I really believe that in those moments, and he proved it. He proved he can move the ball in those moments. So, Bryce Young, thing one, that's what I'm most concerned about, but not because I don't believe that he can play the position. It's because I think he has an enormous amount of pressure on him to prove that he can play up to the level of the other guys that people want to compare him to.
That's fair.
And I just hope that fans realize that if he doesn't meet those marks in terms of comparing him to the Strides, to the Burrows and the young guys who are taking over the lead now, that he's a failure. He's not going to be a failure. He's just going to have to win a different way than people anticipate, and that's okay. And that's what I want to see from him. Like that's why I was okay with Teddy. That's why I was okay with Alex back in the day. I didn't care, that they didn't have like the biggest arm or, didn't have like the big gaudy stats, as long as the wins were piling up.
You want a player that's going to put your team in the position to win, and you want a player that's going to lead your team to that position to win. That's it.
That's it. Like I use this example, and I don't know if it's going to play out this way or not.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Herbert is one of the most gifted quarterbacks in the league, right?
Absolutely.
Justin Herbert probably is going to have less statistical success with Jim Harbaugh
for sure
than he had up until now, but I think
way less hero ball and dependency on him.
Yeah, but I think he's gonna end up having more wins. It may not be this year, but I think he'll eventually have more wins than he's ever had in
more team success than personal accolades.
Yes. And so I think we're past the rookie year now.
Mm-hmm.
I want Bryce Young to be here for a long time, but I want us to adjust to who he is and be okay with that, and put the onus on the team. Like in the previous era, we had Cam Newton as a great talent,
right?
And because he was such a great talent, the team never, I don't think, except for a couple years, they never truly built the team around him to sustain success. Bryce Young isn't that type of quarterback.
Nope.
So I think the responsibility should be less on Bryce to be way better and more on Dan Morgan and Dave Canales and
to
Dave
make the team better.
To make the team better so he can have success. And that's okay. Icky, I just speak on Icky because I know you're trying to wrap up. Icky should have a short leash. I mean, he's the number one concern because he has the most vital role in protecting Bryce. So I think everybody else on the line is proven at their positions. I know Corbett isn't, but he's a proven NFL lineman.
He's had success at the NFL level. It's on a different interior position, but by all accounts, he should be able to make that move. There's mental hang up for the center position for him.
Yeah, I've seen lesser experienced guys like Liam Eichenberg in Miami switch to play center, right? He was a left tackle at Notre Dame. But he adjusted, right? I think Corbett if a guy like that can adjust from tackle to center, I think Corbett, the guy who played beside the center his entire career, the guy who trained to be a center before, I think he can make the adjustment because his experience is going to make up for a lot. That some younger guy trying to make that transition may not have, but I think he's a leader. I think Icky needs to really figure out how much it takes to be good at this level and really try his best to become that player that his potential says he can be. I think he has some fundamental things that limit him and what he can do as a pass protector. I don't know if he can truly fix those things in terms of his technique, but that's what he has to figure out. And I hope that he does. But, we'll see. I just think I think between him playing his role and elevating himself to be the best left tackle he can be, Bryce doing less of what Bryce Young is expected to do and more of what Dave Canales would want him to do for him. Yeah. And I think if he can do what Dave Canales plans for him to do and schemes him to do, then I think Bryce is going to have some natural success, like that may not put him into the elite category, but can put him into a respectable quarterback category, i.e. Geno Smith, i.e. Baker Mayfield. And if he can just get into that category and stay there for a number of years, I don't think anybody would look back at Bryce Young and say he never lived up to his. Right. And that's as fans, that's what you want. What we should want more so than thinking he has to become a top 5 guy and getting online every day on Twitter and trying to make an argument that he is that guy. Like, don't do that, because to me that's what makes the situation like kind of icky. I don't.
Yeah, that's what makes it not as there's less. What is the right word for this? Dignity, almost integrity to the conversation, right? Yeah. Like you lose integrity when you kind of romanticize and fabricate things that don't need to be romanticized at this point of this juncture, right? And it's incredible perspective. I like that conversation so much because I think that that's a conversation that could honestly go on, and I mean this sincerely. I think that we could carry this conversation for literally probably 3 or 4 hours because I think that there's so many folds to take back and speak on. But I'll wrap it up with a couple of things and then we'll end the episode. Yeah. So much conversation has been made about the alignment, right, of organizations and personnel and all of those things. There's an alignment factor here in Carolina that I think you touched on that I think also plays a huge part in Bryce Young's success. That's the alignment of the careers, the prove-its for Dave Canales and Bryce Young. You talk about the way Frank Reich was with Bryce Young as like more of a father figure than a head coach and a hungry coach and all of those kinds of things. Yeah. Dave Canales and Bryce Young are looking to prove the same things. Frank Reich had 1 Super Bowls. Frank Reich had monikers about what he was good at from a coaching standpoint. People talked about him in certain regards around the league. Dave Canales is out to prove that those things are correct about him. Bryce Young is out to prove that first overall pick was worthy for him. These are things that they can lament together in, and that they are going to have a same goal when they are approaching their everyday work ethic. So that's one fold that I really like about that offense. The last part that I will finish on is that I agree with you that fans don't need to do this thing that we just talked about, romanticizing and saying he could be a top 5 quarterback. He needs to be a top 5 quarterback and all these things. I do want him to start out as a game manager. I do want him to get his footing and comfortability in the NFL and figuring out where he wins, because that's part of it for me, is that he has to figure out where he wins and then excel in that area. Then you're going to develop your game, though. So just because I say that I want him to be a game manager and I want him to win in the ways that he can win right now, that also isn't me excluding the possibility that he becomes a top 5, top 4, top 3 quarterback. All of those things are in the realm of possibility, but I tell my 6-year-old all the time, you can't count to 10 without going through the first 9 numbers. Like, you just can't do it. There's a process that you have to get through the first part first to get to the end result. Bryce Young has to get through those intermediate steps. He has to get through those first 9 digits if he wants to reach level 10.
Yeah.
Let him get to those first few levels of success and knowing who he is and being comfortable and understanding the NFL and seeing what the NFL is throwing at him and calibrating what his skills allow him to do. And then if he can do that at that Geno Smith level, if he could do that even at a Brock Purdy level, if he could do it at a Dak Prescott level, then all of a sudden you can look at the game and say, so how do I take that next step so that I can be compared directly to my peers that are up here in the top 3, top 2? And the offensive scheme and the players and all of that have to evolve around him as well, right? We talked about Joe Burrow at the very beginning of the show. He came in with a really nice talent around him. He had Tyler Boyd, he had AJ Green, and he had rookie T. Higgins. But you know what that front office did when they looked at that? The offensive line was weak. AJ Green was aging. And they had just watched Joe Burrow find success with 3 dynamic, explosive receivers. Yeah. So they made a point of emphasis to go and get Jamar Chase to add to T. Higgins. And then they built that offensive line and they kept Tyler Boyd. That is what you do. You have to figure out, and you know what? I think the Canales and Dan Morgan are starting to understand a little bit of that and are doing that with the Deontay Johnson, with the Xavier Legettes, like we talked about. Yeah. If all of this can come together, man, I'm very excited about the possibilities of this offense and it's Carolina Panthers team with Bryce Young at the helm. JJ, let me wrap this up with this, man. I talked about it at the very beginning, and this is the weekend that's coming up. Father's Day weekend. I'll give a real quick soliloquy. First of all, I do want to say Happy Father's Day to all of the followers that are fathers, man, and father figures. Like it is an important thing, dude. And you know, I feel bad that I didn't do this for Mother's Day because I should have. I just didn't have an episode that I did at that time. Yeah. But I think that there is so much, man, that I coached my kids' football team for the first year this year. It was my very first time coaching. Awesome. First of all, it's incredibly difficult to coach 4 to 7-year-olds to teach them the game of football. Man, just getting some of these kids to run straight was the most maddening thing I've done in my entire existence. But it's also incredible because my kid, he asked me today in the car, during the season wrapped up 2 weeks ago, and he asked me in the car, he goes, "Dad, you still excited about that last win we had?" It's like, hell yeah, you bet I am, dude. Like, I am still jacked up and riding on cloud 9 from a flag football win with my 6-year-old, you know? But there is a huge part, man, on what the development, we talk about coaches and all this stuff with these NFL players. There's a huge part of development in life that comes from having a steady voice, a guiding voice, and someone that you can trust. And that's what the Carolina Panthers have provided the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Chargers through the history of this franchise. I want to point this out real quick. The Carolina Panthers are 12-5 against the Arizona Cardinals. We are 6-1 historically against the Los Angeles Chargers, and we play both of these teams this year. Arizona in Week 16 at home, and we play the Chargers Week 2 in our home opener. So happy Father's Day, Carolina Panthers. Your 2 children are going to celebrate you this year. We get another chance to put another W on the board. If I've learned anything from Twitter, it comes from one of my favorite Panthers Twitter follows, and that's Little Rocket NASA. And these are 2 teams that are clear belt to asses situations. This is something that the Carolina Panthers have done well, and we have to celebrate that on holiday weekends. So shout out Little Rocket NASA, shout out all the dads and all the father figures and the community of people that are raising good young men and women to do good things in this world, man, especially in sports. It's a pivotal thing. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate all y'all for listening to this episode for 2 hours. JJ, I appreciate you, man. We have tried so hard to get one of these things done. And tonight we came into it saying 30, 45 minutes, man, I'll get you out of here. You gave me 2 hours of your time, man. And I appreciate you very, very much.
No, same thing, man. You know, folks don't know, you know, that we talk, you know, in the DMs, and, you know, and we try to pull this off. And I appreciate you for, you know, for sticking with it with me. I'm not a natural talker. I know that doesn't feel true, you know, after you're
tricking everybody on these podcasts, man.
I know. I'm the most long-winded person when it comes to talking ball, but I think that's my little sweet spot when it comes to communicating is talking football and talking sports. And now, you know, focused on the Carolina Panthers, and you know, I've always respected what you do. the first time I heard you, I think it was on another podcast. I think it was Panthers on Tap. I was like, man, this dude sounds like a superstar. But it only added
Shout out
to
Panthers on Tap, by the way. Them boys those are awesome dudes, man.
Those are our guys, but no, I mean, I had already kind of like followed, some of the things that you were tweeting and kind of like seeing your presence pick up on Twitter. And, I'm not the, end all be all on, who has the best takes, versus who doesn't, who's crazy versus who isn't. But I too learn from the fans, right? I learn from
absolutely,
how you see the game, like what's important from a fan perspective, from people who actually go and experience the games there in Charlotte. 100%. Like there's a lot that I try to take in informationally to make sure that I'm processing the fandom of the Carolina Panthers in the right way, and that when I speak on things, I'm doing it in a balanced way that's not offensive, to different parts of the fan base and the diversity that we have within the fan base.
Demographics, right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that you are very conscientious of that. When you tweet, even when things kind of cross over into the areas that we don't like to speak about, if it touches politics or something like that, or race or anything, that you can you know how to navigate that. And I appreciate anybody who can do that. And so big respect to you for being able to establish yourself and establish a platform, and do so with decency and respect, and clean language to where I can show my son a tweet. And, because people don't realize that, man. You're talking about Father's Day, and I promise I'll let you wrap this up.
No, you're good, man.
But being a dad is the only thing I ever wanted to be in life. I never had a lot of goals, a lot of dreams. I'm a small town boy, and raised the hard way, laying bricks and blocks and, things like that. And never imagined being where I'm at in life. But I did dream of being a dad. And God bless me, with, being able to have children, being able to be present in their lives. I think is the most important charge that I have, and that, most men have in life if they're able, is to be a father. And so, my fandom at this point in my life is very focused on how my children experience fandom, and making sure that they have a fan experience that, that has me present with them. It may not always be wins, and celebrating, Super Bowls or championships every year. And definitely hasn't been that, with these Carolina Panthers recently. But it's going through something together. It's knowing how to stick with it when it's not easy or convenient, and just and not necessarily having to stay, with a certain team because Dad said that that's our team. But the crazy part is, my son pulled me to the Carolina Panthers, and because
funny how that happens.
Yeah, he fell in love with Cam Newton. And so when it was time to, to really assess where I wanted to be as a fan, the fact that he was already home, and he wasn't born in Carolina, he was born in Texas, but he gravitated to the Carolina Panthers. And so it made that transition easy for me. And now experiencing the game and, with him and through him as a dad, man, and this experience, that we have together as a community on Twitter, I have to represent myself in a way that I know that at some point my son is going to be able to
find out about it.
Yeah, look up Panthers culture and see how he conducts himself, how my dad conducts himself on Twitter. So, everybody, you do it how you do it. I do it how I do it based on who I am in life. And, Ricky, the way that you do it, I can see that. I respect that. And all the other, dads and people on Panthers Twitter, mothers too, if you're out there listening, just love what you're doing for your children, love participating in the space with y'all. And Ricky, love the fact that you brought me here to share this night with you. I hope it's not our last time.
Not at all, man. Yeah, not at all. And let me say too, thank you to your son for getting you into this Panthers universe, because I've appreciated it. I will let people know that originally this meant a lot to me to do this episode with you, because we had originally discussed possibly even having your son on with you. Because I think it's such a special thing, man. I think highly of you as a person, and I don't know you like to the depths of your core or anything like that, but we've had enough conversations that I can tell that you're a stand-up human being and that we align on a lot of like fabric issues. And so I really did have an interest in talking to him, but I dropped the ball. We dropped the ball on the planning of all of this. And unfortunately, kids, man, they have priorities that are way cooler than jumping on a podcast and talking with their dad and some stranger. So like they're going to do other things. But what I hope, man, what I really, really hope is that he gets to watch this episode and see just how impressive and knowledgeable his dad is. And that he understands, man, he's got a great resource available to him. And as long as he doesn't do what Ikem Ekwonu did and doesn't use all of his available resources to its fullest, he's in a great position for success, JJ. Look, man, thank you very much, dude, for the time. This will not be the last episode that we do, but this will be the last segment of this episode. So with that, I am going to go ahead and I am going to play the exit music. If you've stuck around for 2 hours, I appreciate every single one of you. Maybe you broke this up into 2 or 3 podcasts or something like that. It's worth it, man. JJ, thanks for coming on, man. And once the Panthers start getting things actually kicking off and playing some football, I look forward to doing it again, man.
Yes, sir.